I recreated 5 Netflix thumbnails so I could see what I could learn about their attention and clickability. Is that a real word? Netflix is known for putting a ton of time and research into their thumbnails, and not just for their originals, but for any show and movie that they have available. It's even said that they create variations for each thumbnail to make sure that they show you the right thumbnail that you are likely to click on. It's really genius marketing, and I wanted to see what I can learn from some of their top designs. I scrolled to their current top 10 section, grabbed a few screenshots, and did a little mini photo shoot to start recreating these thumbnails. The first one is for their new show, Blockbuster. We've got Randall Park on the cover, looking particularly happy to be holding this outdated technology. I grabbed a stock photo of a VHS tape from Envato Elements and started photoshopping it into my hand in place of this object that I held during my shoot. I noticed that this design looked particularly photoshopped and the colors on Randall Park looked very overdone, but it's obvious it was a choice and not done by mistake. I took this image of a shelf for the background and started adding in the duplicate tapes, and I immediately realized the background is way more dull than the foreground. The skin tones are very saturated but not overexposed, separating it very obviously from the background. I desaturated the shelf and the tapes and even added a solid black layer between the back and foreground, adjusting its transparency. This helps make the difference between the two just as obvious as the original. After doing this, I immediately noticed the fake shadow behind him to give it further separation. I bumped the saturation of the foreground up to make the tape extra bright and added the text. I feel like this text could have been brighter to stand out more, so I'm curious if there was a reason to keep it subtle on this design. The second one's for a show I haven't heard of called From Scratch. This one features Zoe Saldana gazing upward with a bright daytime scene behind her. It reminded me of like a boardwalk amusement park, so I searched for a background image of something like that. It took me a while to find the right one because I knew the bright colors and the full blue sky were going to be super important here. Once I had the background image in place, I used Photoshop's neural filters to harmonize my photo with the colors in the image. This made me realize that there was a very cinematic color grade on this thumbnail image, and I would need to make this match. I messed with the colors and textures in the camera raw filter and even used some presets to help me get there. I added in some curves and levels adjustments to get the black levels where I wanted them, and I even added in a solid color layer and messed with dark blues and greens set to exclusion. I had to blur the background to give it a fake bokeh, and with all that, I realized a screen grab from an already perfect cinematic film would be much easier. I also noticed the white font was not 100% white and was only slightly brighter than the whites that are in the image. I don't think I've ever noticed that about a thumbnail before. Next was Inside Man, featuring David Tennant surrounded by 4 other characters, so of course I decided to Photoshop 5 me's. The first thing I noticed was the very subtle highlight of blue on all the characters, and unfortunately when I took my photos, I didn't position my light correctly. If I wanted to do this right, I should have moved my key light further away from my face to darken it up, and moved my highlight behind me so that it only catches the very side of my face. My photos ended up with a hard blue casting over half of my face instead of just the rim lighting, but whatever, you live and you learn. I composed all 5 poses in place, and that's when I noticed the shadows between each layer. I also noticed there was a little bit of shading on the bottom of some of the characters to make them fade into the dark background. There's also a tiny, very subtle highlight of the blue cast behind David, so I added that with a soft brush. I threw on some curves and levels to darken up the images, and bam, this one was done and looking particularly cool if I can pat myself on the back a little. Next was the School of Good and Evil. I really liked how this thumbnail for the School of Good and Evil looked spooky but simple and was popped with the gold treated text. I tried hard to get this pose down, but in the end, I just had to tilt the photo a little and it was almost perfect. I decided to just find a stock photo of people in dark clothes to match this background, and it worked shockingly well. I just had to make the image a little more blue and I was already halfway there. I used the neural filters to harmonize the colors again, and I hand painted in these highlights to match the original. Mine came out with a little bit more of a green hue, but I actually liked it better. I thought it looked a little more dramatic. I painted in this rim highlight because I did not realize it was there when I took my photo for this, and instead of trying to match this font and treatment exactly, I made a text layer with a similar serif font and busted out my trusty Fuller Mo style packs to get this amazing gold final product. This one pops so much and I really love how it came out. I think one bright light behind me could have made this lighting effect be almost perfect. Maybe I'll try it again when my beard grows back so I can see if it lights similarly to the actress's hair. Last but not least was Killer Sally. I love how this one's very different from the others with its vintage treatment and simple photo. I found a background image of a wall and door and changed the color using hue and saturation adjustments. I knew that I'd be throwing a photo filter on it, so I wasn't super concerned with getting the blue exact. I made this very simple shadow behind me by just copying my photo and making it black and blurring it out. Once I had the main part of the image done, I grouped all the items into a folder and duplicated it before flattening the copy. I always keep a working version of my layers just in case I mess something up, which I did. I accidentally flattened the copy with the Killer Sally thumbnail on it, but luckily, since I was working off a copy, I was able to delete it, go back to the original folder, copy it again, and do it correctly. I ran the flattened image through the camera raw filter again and threw on this amazing preset that I bought from Wergensen.com, and then I just adjusted the color slightly to get close to the original. Then I downloaded these scratch textures from Envato Elements and added this font and gave it a name that I regretted immediately. I absolutely hate the nickname Nikki. I love how this one looks like a vintage photo, but it's actually composed of different parts. The harsh shadow makes it look like the old cameras with flash that was way too bright, and the scratches remind me of the designs I did when I first started back in the late 90s. These designs came out super cool, and copying the Netflix thumbnails really gave me some insight on making designs that make you want to click them. As a designer, I typically don't want to make things that stand out or look unnatural, but that seems to be the standard for making thumbnails and making things that people want to click. Now, it's pretty obvious how I can use fake shadows and oversaturation, composed backgrounds with obviously fake images on top to make some really great thumbnail specific art. Let me know which one's your favorite below. Also, make sure to come back next week because I'll be recreating 5 of Ryan Trahan's YouTube thumbnails to see what I can learn from those. All right, thank you guys so much for checking out my channel, and like always, we'll catch you on the next one.